Attorney knows best. Intelligent interviews. Interesting insight. Intriguing information. Attorney knows best. Here's your host, Sean Bartley.
Today on Attorney Knows Best, I have the pleasure of speaking with Tami Napier, Esquire. Tami is a seasoned prosecutor in the state of Indiana, Marshall County. She's been practicing for over 20 years. She practices as a district attorney, a prosecutor, state's attorney, whatever jurisdiction you're in, there are different names, but she's the lawyer that keeps the community safe by incarcerating criminal individuals. Tami's prosecuted cases for 20 years, over 100 bench trials, countless. Let me get this straight. Countless bench trials and over 120 jury trials, which is an incredible feat. I don't even know how she sleeps. But please welcome Tami Napier.
Good morning.
A sound effect for you. Good morning. Thanks for joining us so early in the morning.
You're welcome.
Indiana. What's the weather like out there?
Typical Indiana, especially northern Indiana, it's gray and in the 30s. So gorgeous. It's beautiful.
I know in the summer and the spring, Indiana is incredibly gorgeous and beautiful, but we're the same here. It's like 30 something degrees, gray, but hey, we love it.
I do.
DC Metro. Yeah. Tell us about Marshall County. Where's Marshall County in Indiana?
Okay, so Marshall County is in north central Indiana. Probably 30 minutes, you'd be into Michigan. We are the county south of St. Joe County, and St. Joe County's county seat, I think you'd recognize as South Bend, a la Notre Dame. So straight down 31 would take you to Indianapolis, and Indianapolis is about 2 hours, give or take, depending on how risky you feel going 31 with all the state troopers, about 2 hours south of here. So,
but you're in Indiana. Do they call you a prosecutor, state's attorney? What's the name?
Yeah, in Indiana, there are 92 counties in Indiana, and there are 91 elected prosecutors, because there are 2 counties on the Ohio River that actually share an elected prosecutor because of the just the lack of density of population. And in the 92 counties in Indiana, 91 elected prosecutors. We call them prosecutors in Indiana, not district attorneys. It's a nomenclature thing. It's essentially the same kind of duties and oath required no matter what jurisdiction you're in. And then in every county, the state of Indiana pays the elected prosecutor. And then in each county, the state will also pay for a chief deputy prosecutor, which is what I am. So I'm the
deputy prosecutor.
I am the chief deputy prosecutor in Marshall County.
You have job security then. So the elected prosecutor comes and goes and you stay because you're the one that has all the knowledge.
Actually, that's not true, because chief deputy is kind of the lieutenant, right?
Okay.
So my job is to make my boss look good and do a good job and show up every day, work hard, know your stuff, try the cases, and make sure that your elected prosecutor is supported. But it is a political appointment, so I'm not hired. I am appointed by the elected. So essentially, every chief deputy in Indiana's wagon is hitched to the star of the elected. So you have a common goal, which is to serve the community, hold people accountable, seek justice, find the truth, and serve the public to the best of your ability in every county. And so, yes, I work for Nelson Chipman. He's the elected prosecutor here. He's in his second term. And there are no term limits for prosecutors, just to let you know.
I mean, I think that's a good thing.
Yes, it is, because if the community is satisfied with the law enforcement and the work that you're doing, yeah, you should be elected. And there are some that have served 10 terms. Nelson's on his second term. He has an interesting experience, background as a lawyer. Of course, you know, to be a prosecutor, you have to be a lawyer. And then we have deputy prosecutors here also, where most counties do, just because of the volume of cases. And yeah, so that's kind of the structure of the office. And so the deputy prosecutors are still employed by the elected official, but they're typically county paid. So in our situation in Marshall County, Nelson Chipman, my boss, the elected, and I are both actually state employees.
Okay, so you're state employees, you're traveling Route 31 with a bunch of Indiana state troopers. How well do they treat you if you got to get to Indianapolis and you're running late? Relationship like between prosecutors and police officers?
Well, I like to think that I respect speed limits.
I'm sure you do.
But I try to stay with the flow of traffic too, because I do know that if you're not going to stay with the flow of traffic, you can actually be a danger. So like if you get on 465, the beltway around Indianapolis, and you try to go 55, I mean, it's a bad decision to go the speed limit on that road. So yeah, I mean, I try to stay reasonable all the time, but I plan for it. So I'm not trying to do 80, 85 on 31, but man, I've seen some people. Woo! And I've been stopped.
Do you get the same privileges as a police officer? Red light on your car, weaving in and out of traffic, handling a pursuit, or does that all go to the police?
No, we are as prosecutors, we are law enforcement. So I have a badge, which I could show you. I have a badge, and I am statutorily law enforcement. But no, I don't do investigations. I don't have red lights. I don't have a radio. I don't carry a gun. I don't
Why would a prosecutor carry a gun? I would think it would be really important for a prosecutor to carry a gun, because even though you're just doing your job and making sure that justice is done, quote unquote, justice is done, and that the process is properly administered. What I could see family members, either victim family members or the alleged or charged criminal family members, looking at you as an adversary, like a physical adversary and/or a threat. And so it's surprising that a prosecutor wouldn't carry a firearm.
Well, I mean, you can, just as any private citizen has those Second Amendment rights.
But I mean, as a piece of standard equipment, why not?
It's discretionary. I've never felt the need to do that. I think that in the thousands of criminal cases I've had, and trust me, if I had $1, no, let's say a nickel, for every time somebody threatened to kill me,
wow,
I would be retired, and we would be talking about a lot of different other stuff than what we're getting ready to talk about. But I think I've maybe had a handful of cases, and maybe one or two where I thought it was legitimate. So a lot of times, as a prosecutor, and just really as a lawyer in general, it can drag people down, because typically every person you talk to is going through one of the hardest times in their life, if not the hardest time in their life. And a lot of times you have to give bad news to people every day, and they don't want to hear it. A lot of times it has to do with the delivery and the rapport you've built up with that individual. So I really have not felt that personally threatened, except maybe once I have, and then I've had judges tell me and other prosecutors say, you need to pay attention to that. But other than that, I mean, what am I going to do? you can't turn the paradigm of crime around 180 degrees and think that you're going to prevent crime, because you're not going to typically prevent crime. Crime and what we do is reactionary.
Right. I find it really surprising. I worked in a prosecutor's office as a law clerk for 3 months in Riverside County, California, and I was always frightened. Believe it or not, I'm a big guy, but size doesn't matter with regards to people who wish you harm. And so if they wish you harm, they're going to be prepared to do it, and they're going to have something that mitigates your size, and usually it's a weapon. I also was a foreclosure attorney to get my start here in Maryland, foreclosing on family farms, people's property. And I've actually had the occasion where bailiff had to escort me to my car and make sure I made it out of the parking lot, and then I was on my own. And that was scary, but I can only imagine what you have to deal with. But we had this in a conversation offline, is I thought I was tough until I worked in a prosecutor's office, and prosecuting attorneys are some of the, I mean, especially state and local prosecutors, some of the toughest people, tough-minded people and serious people that I've met. Talk about being tough-minded and how you developed a sense of toughness for your job.
I think that's a really good question, actually. And you're right, that it is a situation that could develop into violence. I, like you, have been escorted to my car several times, or escorted, to my office. And I actually had a case in Indianapolis where that went on for like 6 months, and this guy's photo was posted all over the office that if he showed up, they were to call, immediately. But, nothing ever happened. That doesn't mean nothing can happen. But I meet people every day who are going about their everyday life, and they become a victim of a crime. They don't see it coming. Criminals have choices. Victims do not.
Do not.
So when a crime occurs, what you have to understand about that, and I guess why I do my job the way I do it, is that, when you're a victim of a crime, you're in a reactionary state. The person that's offending and perpetrating the crime, they know what's going to happen. They know the plan, and they choose where it happens, how it happens, and when it happens. You are in a reactionary state. So, your ability to protect yourself in any given situation is dicey. I just had a jury trial in September. It was a robbery, an armed robbery trial. My victim was an MMA fighter. Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah.
The victim?
Yeah, my victim was an MMA fighter.
Okay, and so that like justifies me being wary of like threats, because I'm not an MMA fighter.
Yeah. Right, you should be aware always of your surroundings. But here he is, an MMA fighter. Guy asks him for a lighter. He reaches into his car. Guy puts a gun in his side, and he gives up his car. And after, he told me afterward that all of his buddies, his MMA buddies, are like, "Why didn't you fight him?" And he did the right thing. He survived it. He gave up his car, and he's here to talk about it. So, but what a lot of victims struggle with is the fact that they didn't react the way they thought they would. Mm-hmm. And they, people like to think that they would handle a situation in a certain way, but the truth is, your brain is going through a reactionary process of, this is happening, what are the options, and making a decision. Well, in that time, the person that's perpetrating the crime on you, they're already way ahead of you. So
yeah, they've already made the plan.
Yeah. So to me, I've just met a lot of people that have been in that situation, and I don't know how I would react to it. I'd like to think that I know, but I don't know. So to me, I keep those emotions and those fears in check at all times, because, and here's why, I feel like victims of crime deserve my best. effort. And my best effort is immediately compromised if I'm emotional about it,
Right.
if I'm personally invested in it. And so I try to keep that consciously out of my work. It's not that I don't care. I care very much, but I can't let my personal feelings get involved in any criminal case, because then I've compromised my professional judgment, and my experience has kind of gone by the wayside because I've got emotions involved, and I need to stick to my training and what I know.
Now, that's one of the problems that I've always had, is keeping my personal feelings out of the case. Usually I only take cases I'm interested in.
Mhm.
And because I have an interest in it, I have a hard time keeping my personal feelings out of it and not endearing myself to my client or putting myself in my client's shoes
Yeah.
and being the most fierce advocate I can for that client. How do you balance that as a prosecutor? And one of the things I like to point out is Tami Napier prosecutes serious, dangerous felonies, the worst of the worst of worst crimes. So how do you put a boundary between not getting emotionally or personally involved in the case?
Yeah. I would like to tell you that there's a way to train yourself to do that. I think a lot of people do get burned out as lawyers in general because of what you're describing. Uh, I don't know. I have found a way to compartmentalize that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's particularly difficult when you have a victim in a case. I'm speaking on prosecutorial work right now, but if you have a victim that you particularly identify with, if it's been a tremendously violent crime, if it's a child victim, it is hard to do that. But at the same time, I want to do my best. I feel compelled to respect the defendant's rights, but at the same time be that advocate for the victim. And finding that balance, to me, at least the way I practice, to find that balance in respecting the defendant's rights, because they are cloaked with the presumption of innocence, period. And they never lose that at all until a jury comes back and says they're guilty, or a judge says they're guilty, or they plead guilty.
That's interesting that you can take that tack with regards to a criminal defendant who's alleged to have done horrible things.
Yes.
And you act as though you have to overcome their presumed innocence,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not looking at them in terms of like an emotional or personal standpoint, like they're like this horrible beast, but rather they are presumed innocent, and I have to make these facts stick to show that this individual is the person who committed this crime. That's an interesting take on it.
Correct. Well, it's actually exactly what you should be doing, because a defendant is cloaked with the presumption of innocence. The state has the burden of proof. We have the burden of proof to prove each and every element of every crime charged beyond a reasonable doubt, and they never lose that presumption of innocence. So to me, I don't think of it as, is the defendant a good person or a bad person? That's a judgment call.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, I want to hold them accountable for what they did and what I can prove they did.
Mm-hmm.
And that burden.
That's a fair approach.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's how I think of it. And, as the state with the heaviest burden in criminal law, as it should be, I'm not trying to get anybody to write a check at the end of the day. I'm trying to take away their liberty.
Right.
And so it should be a heavy burden. And I welcome that burden. It's our job. It's our sworn duty. It's an oath that we take. And I respect that. So to me, it's about accountability. It's not whether they're a good person or a bad person, because every defendant has people that love them and care about them.
Right.
And unfortunately for the families of defendants, they go through it a lot. I've had a lot of defendants' families come up and thank me for the fairness that I've shown.
A defendant's family. Thank you.
Oh,
For fairness.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an example where you were thanked by a defendant's family and you successfully prosecuted the defendant? I mean, when I say successful, you received a conviction or a plea
Yeah.
deal.
Right. So typically that arises most in drug dealing cases, where people get involved with using drugs and then they escalate that behavior up into dealing drugs. And family members have thanked me that they felt like that person would be dead if they weren't stopped. And so
Wow, that is an interesting perspective, that you helped stop a drug dealer and their family thanked you because you saved their life with a successful prosecution. Wow.
yes. Yeah.
That's a goosebumps kind of comment also. I mean, my perception of prosecutors was different until I went to law school and I law clerked with the prosecutor. I always thought that they were unfair. All the cases were slam dunks and they had an easy job to do. Tell us why that perception is false.
Well, the perception is false because I think what people omit when they take that very honestly overly simplistic view is that what you don't understand are the thousands of criminal cases that don't get filed.
Wow.
Okay.
Thousands that don't get filed.
That's right, because the public only knows about things that are public record, and things only become public record when they're filed with the court. Okay. So for example, I'm just going to use numbers. So let's say just on misdemeanors or low-level felonies that happen every day, the most common types of criminal offenses. So let's say we get 50 cases submitted today to screen. And we as prosecutors, our role in that process is to decide, does it rise to the level of justifying the filing of a criminal charge because the evidence is there that I believe ethically I can use to prove this person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I know the evidence is admissible, that kind of analysis. But what people don't understand is out of that 50 cases, there are probably 20 that will never get filed. So I think of myself, and I told you this before, I like to think of myself as the best defense attorney in the county because I protect their rights before they even have a lawyer.
So wait a minute. That's unusual. You protect their rights before they have a lawyer. That's an interesting statement from a prosecutor, because most of the time, the public's perception is that you're trying to take away their rights and you don't care about their rights and you want a conviction at all costs. But you just said you're seeking to protect their rights. Can you expound upon that?
Absolutely want to protect their rights. You know, I look at every case I screen as if I was on the other side of this scenario, would I want me screening that case? Would I want someone that knew the law, knew the rules of evidence, knew the case law, and could apply that to the facts as they're presented when you're screening that case, and knowing my rights? So you don't want to file cases where, you know, evidence is inadmissible, or you feel that there was some kind of wrongdoing or things like that. You have to be careful about that. But you have to also balance that with dangers to the community. You don't want to cut people loose just because your case is weak. You know, you can't just file easy breezy cases. It doesn't work that way. There are no perfect cases. And I feel like if I've done my job as a prosecutor correctly, there's really not much for a defense attorney to do. You know?
So if you do your job properly, you protect the rights of the defendant, you gather the facts and the evidence, and you put together a charging document, then and only then do you feel that the case is one that could be quote unquote a slam dunk, or no?
No, 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 no. You don't get that luxury. There are no perfect cases. In fact, the cases that you end up trying are the cases where, it's like, well, I don't know what's going to happen.
It's like a 50-50 thing.
Yeah, they're not your strong cases. Your strong cases you resolve with plea agreement. Both sides being reasonable, and it helps, of course, move cases along. The judicial efficiency factor also plays in, but no way, you don't get to just pick and choose to file. Well, let me tell you, you won't be elected very many times if you're only going to file slam dunk cases. So you have to try cases. That's how case law is made too. But yeah, I love what I do, and I truly, truly believe in my oath as a prosecutor that we take is to seek justice. And that is something I take very seriously. I think about it every day.
Now, sometimes I've found the word justice frustrating, right? So there's like amongst the lawyer community, we'll sometimes say, what is justice, right? So justice on the civil side is different than justice on the criminal side.
True.
And you happen to practice both civil and criminal law. Not many attorneys have had a distinguished career in both civil and criminal law. And you've done civil trials and you've done criminal trials. So based upon your experience as a civil attorney and a criminal attorney, how would you define justice?
Wow, I didn't know we were going to get into these really nebulous concepts.
Well, it's not nebulous. It's important because, I mean, when we look at American history and our Constitution, the primary reason why our Constitution came about, and I'll say this, and I don't know how many people realize this, but the core of American liberty begins in the criminal justice system, and the Constitution was written that way because of the unfair prosecution and treatment that our forefathers received from the British government and their criminal prosecution system.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what's in the Constitution was written to prevent tyrannical prosecution and oppression by the government through criminal courts. And the criminal courts are some of our first courts and the most important courts. And then I think civil is second. But because you practiced in both areas successfully, I think you have a different perspective on the idea of justice than most of American lawyers have.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say that. I appreciate that.
No, it's true. I mean, look at it. I mean, you see like career lawyers that only practice in one niche, right?
Right.
And then you practice in civil side. You did patent work, you did civil disputes, and now you're on the criminal side, and our criminal courts are so, I mean, if you look at the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, we all deal with, the government's attempt to prosecute you.
Well, I would agree with your statement about really the contents of the Constitution were about protecting people from arbitrary incursions on personal rights. And, when the British government could come to your house and tell you to get out because they're going to put a garrison of soldiers in there, and you just had to leave and give up all your food. They would, just bust through your door and rifle through your papers and stuff like that. That's why we have the Fourth Amendment. And it's also why the Fourth Amendment is the most litigated amendment out there in the criminal justice system. But to come back to justice, I think, in civil practice, justice to me, and this is me defining this off the cuff with you, in civil practice, you're talking about a person versus a person. So to me, what justice means in civil practice is equity. What is fair? what is fair. And what that means is nobody's going to get everything they want. That's fair. You're going to have to give up something. They're going to have to give up something, and we're going to have to meet in the middle.
Right. And if you don't meet in the middle, you let 12 people decide, or 6 people in some juries, or you let the judge decide, and that's like sometimes the worst scenario.
Oh, the worst, right?
Yeah.
But in the criminal justice system, you have the government, whether that's the federal government or the state government, versus human, right? So it's not my victim versus the defendant. It's the state of Indiana, with me representing the state of Indiana versus that person. And justice in that regard is something that includes the fact that the state is supposed to lose sometimes. You know, sometimes the evidence in a particular case does not rise to the level that a jury finds, or a judge finds convincing to convict what that person is accused of. In civil practice, it's all about equity and what is fair. You know, monetary damages and covering property losses and property rights and division of money. But here, we're not talking about that. So justice is a concept in the criminal justice system that should encompass the fact that I'm not going to win all the time.
Right.
Sometimes the evidence isn't there, and you just really cannot predict. Sometimes you think you have a great case, and it comes out a little different in trial. People say different things, or, you know, I've had, especially in child abuse cases or child sex abuse cases, where kids are great in a forensic interview, they're great in a deposition, they're great in your witness preparation meeting, and then you take them into court and put them on a witness stand in the bright light of a courtroom in front of 12 jurors, a bailiff, a judge, a court reporter, the defendant, the defendant's lawyer, me, my detective, and people in the gallery. And that kid has to sit up there and talk about those subjects in great detail. Can't just get up and say it happened. They have to talk about it in detail.
Yeah.
And sometimes that the situation will happen where a kid gets up there and just freezes. You know, they're scared, they're embarrassed, whatever it is. So you just don't know how your evidence is going to shake out sometimes, and then you lose.
Well, recently you've had some really meaningful cases that, in my opinion, in the idea of justice, meaning of justice, where a criminal defendant or alleged criminal defendant was successfully convicted for the crimes that were proven, and justice was served. And one of those cases was the case of Ricardo Hernandez Vasquez.
Yes.
Can you share with us the facts of that case?
Yes.
And you successfully prosecuted it, right? You were the lead prosecutor.
Yes, yes. Okay, so an interesting case. Essentially, the facts of that case, and this all came out on the record in open court. So
it's already, the case is already tried, over with,
done.
With it.
Conviction entered. He's off at the Department of Correction and appealing his case. So the facts that came out at trial were that there are 2 cousins. One of them's name is Mary and the other Kimberly. They're cousins. And Mary went to stay with Kimberly in 2018. And while she was visiting her cousin and her auntie, auntie's boyfriend molested her.
Wow.
He performed oral sex on her, and she was 12. She did not disclose that happened. She went back to her mother's house, which is about, I don't know, a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive. And she did not see him again. She never told anybody what happened in 2018.
I'm getting emotional hearing this.
And Mary, in 2019, her mom says, "Oh, you're going back to this summer and you're going to spend time with your auntie and your cousin." And Mary says, nope, I'm not going. And her mom's like, well, yes, you are. And Mary says, no, I'm not. And she throws a fit. Mom drops it. The next day, mom brings it up again and says, no, seriously, you are going. I'm not putting up with this. You're 13 years old and you're going to go visit your cousin and stay with your auntie. And Mary says, no, I'm not. And here's why. Well, mom does the right thing, takes her daughter to the police station in the town that they live in, and Mary discloses what happened the year before.
Wow.
So pursuant to state protocol, all children in the home are forensically interviewed. What's interesting about this case is that had Mary not disclosed what happened to her in 2018, a year later, we wouldn't have known about any of this. And here's what happened after that. So then her cousin Kimberly gets forensically interviewed. And she says, nope.
Kimberly, who's living with the perp.
Yep.
Okay.
Kimberly lives there with her mom and her siblings and the perpetrator. And Kimberly's interviewed. Kimberly says, nope, nothing happened. Then Kimberly leaves for a 2-week visitation with her father, her biological dad in Chicago. When she comes back 2 weeks later, mom picks her up at the train station and she says, Mom, I have to tell you the truth. And here, I'm lucky I'm not pregnant.
Whoa.
And her daughter is 15. So what we learned then afterwards is that the defendant had been having full-on intercourse with her since she was 8 years old.
Oh
And she didn't feel safe the first time she was interviewed. So my detective goes to mom of Kimberly and asks, like, tell me about this guy. Well, she gives him the name Rick Bain, like B-A-N-E, Rick Bain. And here's where you can find him. He's up at his mom's in Mishawaka. Well, they can't find Rick Bain in a federal or state database at all. Doesn't exist. Who is this guy? They do locate him. They interview him. And sometime during the course of interviewing him, he says, okay, my real name is Ricardo Hernandez Vasquez. It's not Rick Bain. And the reason he was living for about 7 years under an assumed name is because he was convicted of child molesting in Georgia and was on parole and had absconded on parole. Came up here, met this woman, started living, gave her a fake name and lived with her and had a child with her and molested her daughter and the cousin while he was there.
So there were 3 minor victims.
Well, there were 2 that we know of.
Okay.
Unfortunately, these are the types of crimes, sex offenses are insidious because they tend to continue to perpetrate that offense. It's part of a behavior pattern that is very, very difficult, if impossible, arguably, for someone to stop doing. So he found a place he could hide, live under an assumed name, and had Mary not disclosed, we never would have found out.
So Mary's a hero.
Mary is a hero. She is a hero. But she broke down. She broke down before she testified. She broke down during her testimony. We had to take a break. But she came back and did it.
Now, when prepping Mary for the testimony, what do you do? Do you have a victim witness advocate? Do you meet with Mary? Do you build up her confidence? What is the process in helping a child be a successful witness in these type of horrific cases?
Right. So for me, my approach to it is the first time I meet them, I don't care if they're 5 or 15, I tell them the same thing. The first time I meet them, so when these cases are filed, I make sure that I have a meeting with me and our victim's advocate within the first week of filing, because you want to meet that child and you want to establish that rapport with them. Make sure that they're getting the services they need, that kind of thing. And I tell them, some kids are very forthright and they want to come in and talk about it, because they've been under the assumption by the perpetrator that they did something wrong, that they'll get in trouble if they tell, that this is their little secret, that if they tell anybody, they'll get taken away from mom and mom will get in trouble. And they've had all of these threats. And then once they finally disclose and they're like, oh, hey, nothing bad happened. Wow. Then they tend to really open up and tell you everything. And some kids are very forthright about it. Some kids are not. So I respect that. And
well, they're not going to be forthright because the mind of a child is that they might have been participatory in wrongdoing, and so they're scared, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, defendants can listen. Defendants that perpetrate sex crimes on children, they believe in their minds that they are not harming that child. They go about this, and most statistics would bear it out. I can't tell you the numbers, but I can tell you that the statistics bear out that most children are abused sexually or physically by someone they know and they love and they trust. Mm-hmm. It's not a stranger. That's a rare case. So the perpetrator has been telling them, like, look, you participated in this. You're just as wrong as I am. You need to keep your mouth shut. You'll get in trouble too. They'll send you to juvenile jail. They'll take you away from your family. You'll be in foster care. You won't see your dog anymore. All of these insidious things. So some kids, when you meet them, they like, nothing bad happened. People believe me. And they're very forthright, and they actually want to talk about it. And I'm fine with that. If they want to talk about it at that early stage, great, because they've already been forensically interviewed at this point. But some kids don't. And what I tell them all when I meet them is, I ask them, do you know why you're here? And they'll tell me. They always know. And I will always tell them, look, I want to talk about what happened to you, but if you don't want to do that today, that's fine. But you have to talk to me about it the next time we meet. So if you want to talk about it today, let's do that. But if you don't and you're not comfortable, that's fine too. But yes, at some point they do have to talk about details with me. And we have a brand new law, thanks to the Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council. And actually, my friend Courtney Curtis testified in front of the committee about this. It's a great law that Indiana was one of a very few states that allowed defense attorneys to depose child victims of sex crimes.
Whoa.
They would depose these kids. Mm-hmm. And we've always had to deal with that. And this new law prevents that. I mean, we can still do it by agreement, or a defense attorney can request a hearing and say that they have a particular need to depose the child, and the judge can make a decision about that. But now that's blocked, and that's been tough for kids, really tough for kids.
Was Mary deposed in this case?
Yes, Mary and Kimberly were both deposed, along with
their protect them during the depositions.
Oh, well, it was, they both cried, mm-hmm. Both very upset, embarrassed. They're sitting in a room with adults they don't know. So there's the defense attorney asking questions. There's a court reporter taking everything down. There's me, there's a victim's advocate, and the victim. Mm-hmm. So, it's uncomfortable for, well, I would hope it's uncomfortable if I would ask you to just tell me about your last consensual sexual encounter, Sean. You'd be, I would think, embarrassed to just talk about that in this forum.
Yes.
You're an adult, and I'm asking you about a consensual encounter. So you can imagine the level of discomfort when you're talking about a child or really any victim of a sex crime that has to talk about the worst possible offense and have to do it in detail to a bunch of people that you don't know.
Yeah, I can imagine. How long did that trial last?
3 days.
3 days. What was his defense?
Prove your case.
So they didn't put on a defense?
No.
Wow.
No, and he has no burden to do that. The defense attorney can sit there and drink Starbucks all 3 days, never ask a question, really, and just say, state, prove your case. And he's done his job. So it's my job. I carry the burden. I have to bring the evidence.
Right. And you brought the evidence successfully. I want to, delve deeper, but this kind of subject matter is so sensitive.
Yeah.
And it's a public record, but it's so sensitive. I have trouble talking about it and querying about it. Like I always say this, I thought I was tough until I worked in the prosecutor's office and had to deal with these issues. And one of the things that you said during the course of this podcast is that you are able to separate yourself personally from these cases and then prosecute it with the facts and carry the burden without being emotionally involved. And that's really interesting. But you had a successful outcome in this case. And what was it?
He was convicted on all counts. And then we had, after he was convicted on all of the counts, I filed what is called a sentencing enhancement. And there is a sentencing enhancement available under Indiana criminal law for repeat sex offenders. And he certainly was. He had a sex offense conviction out of Georgia on a child. And so we used that prior conviction to enhance his sentence on these convictions. And he was convicted of 7 level 1 child molest offenses. And
when you say level 1, what does that mean?
So in Indiana, felonies are ranked from murder. Murder is its own felony. And then there are level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 offenses. So level 1 offenses in Indiana carry a sentencing range of 20 to 40 years. 20 to 50 years, however, if they are a credit restricted felon. And he is a credit restricted felon because he perpetrated these level 1 offenses on victims that were 12 and under.
So he was convicted of how many level 1 offenses?
7. And each one of those crimes, even more, I don't want to get off too much in the weeds, but each one of those level 1 offenses is considered a statutory crime of violence, which means they can be stacked at sentencing, right? That they aren't just going to all run together. So that's what the judge did. He took judicial notice of the age of the victims. He took judicial notice of the fact that these are all offenses of statutory crimes of violence. And so he stacked them. So he has to serve the sentence on this one before he starts this one. He has to serve this one before he serves this one. And then all of those have to be served before he serves time on the repeat sex offender enhancement. So it's all stacked. Like it really speaks to the level of danger that man is to any community that he lives in.
So the sum total of his conviction resulted in how many years of imprisonment?
300.
300. Wow, you did an excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
In comparison of other successful cases that you've prosecuted, where does this one rank in the length of years that Vasquez received?
It's the most of any case I've certainly ever had, and by a country mile. Most criminal offenses are not sentenced to that kind of extraordinary sentence. This was an extraordinary case. You have multiple victims. He's committed the crime before. He lived under an assumed name. He lived with and had a child with a woman for all of those years, and not one time, not 1 second, not once did he ever even tell her his real name.
Did he have ID? Social
No.
Security card? How did he make a living?
Oh,
How do these guys go undetected? That's
cash.
so troubling. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cash. But I had another child molest case again.
You're a specialist in this field, right?
Well, I think I've had specialized experience and certainly specialized training. And the specialized training I received, I got when I was a deputy prosecutor in Marion County in Indianapolis. And I was in the sex crimes unit. And so all I prosecuted, my entire caseload for that entire time in sex crimes was rape, child molest, serious child abuse cases and neglect cases. And then we were also assigned to murder cases where a child or an infant was the victim of the case. So I will say that the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, when I was there, put a lot of money and placed a lot of emphasis on that particularized training in prosecuting those types of cases, because you really do have to know how to do it. And it's funny that you brought up how it gets you emotional and everything, but I can tell you that other deputy prosecutors feel the same way you do, and they'll say, I couldn't do that. They want to stay with drugs and guns and murder and robbery and burglary and fraud and mortgage fraud and they're fine doing all that, but you start talking about sex offenses, nah, they don't want to, they don't want to do that.
You were starting to talk about another sex offense case.
That guy, that was a big media case. But
what was his name?
His name was Michael Spencer. He's still in prison.
Thank God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He and his wife adopted 7 kids, and he perpetrated on 6 of the 7, and filed a huge case on him. It was a big media case in Hancock County, where I was at the time, because his wife was a probation officer, and I charged her too. And okay, so he ended up pleading guilty, though. He signed a plea agreement for 150 years executed.
Wow, you really stacked that case.
Yes, and
Amazing.
I was glad to get that result, because I wanted to spare the victims testifying, as you try to do in every case, and you should respect that, to try to not put the kid through it, and I was glad that happened in that case. I will tell you that case, the Michael Spencer case, was the most salacious case I've handled. So it was a good idea for him to plead guilty.
Why is it the most salacious?
Just the facts were just heinous. So heinous.
Yeah, he adopted kids,
and
he molested them, and it was a plan from the beginning.
Well, it seemed like it. And then when they disclosed, 2 of the girls disclosed to their adopted mother, who was the probation officer, she didn't believe them. Well, she knows more than anybody that that's not your decision. If a child tells you that, you have a duty to report it. And she didn't, and that's why she was charged.
And what happened with her?
Took her to a jury trial, and she was convicted.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was her time?
I think she got all suspended time. I don't recollect her ever going to jail or anything like that. But they were felonies, so she could not be a probation officer anymore, nor should she be. And she knew she had a duty to report. She just didn't report. And that was the case. And
did she foster the sexual offenses? I mean, was she behind it? Was she acting in concert with her criminal husband?
She wasn't participating in the molest. The allegation against her was that when the kids did come to her, she didn't do what Mary's mom did. And what Mary's mom did was she took her kid to the police department, and then the police department arranged for a forensic interview.
What advice would you give parents who have reason to believe that their child is a victim of sexual assault? This is really important.
Well, I think if you believe your child has been the victim of someone as a sex offender around you or near you, or you believe something inappropriate has happened, you need to talk to your child. But you need to know how to talk to your child. They have to feel safe. They have to know that no matter what they say, they won't get in trouble. That it's really where you're going to fall back on the bond that you have with your child, because they have to feel safe telling you. Because if they have been a victim of a sex offense, just know that they have been threatened to keep quiet. And I'll tell you, I've never had a jury trial on a child molest case or a rape case where, because you call, Sean, you call maybe, 60 people to come in the veneer to be selected and questioned during jury selection as to whether they'll be an appropriate juror for the trial. And, eventually you get down to 13 or 14 because you're going to have 2 or 1 alternate, but you got 12 in your jury, right? And I have never, ever, ever had a jury trial on a sex offense case where I didn't have maybe a quarter, at least 10% of people say, I can't sit on this jury because I was a victim of a sex offense I was perpetrated on by a family member, a cousin, a friend, a neighbor, a babysitter, whatever, and I never told anybody about it. So I can't be fair and impartial. I've never, ever had that jury. So that tells you how underreported it is, because I'll have 60, 70-year-old people sit there and say, yeah, it happened to me when I was 11, and I've never told anybody about it.
Should a parent immediately take their child to the police, or should the parent do their own interview, gather facts, and then share those facts with the police? And if the parent does, can the parent testify as a witness, or are they disqualified via hearsay rule?
Well, that depends. That's an evidentiary question. But I think, talk to your child. Let them reassure them they'll never be in trouble for what they say. And I would advise that if you believe your child, you've had a conversation with your child, don't get overly detailed about it. Reel in your emotional reaction. And if you believe that's credible, then contact authorities and let a trained forensic interviewer, child interviewer who knows the language to use, who knows how to develop that information, let them delve into the details of it. That's my advice. Because
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. That's fine.
No. Keep with your advice. We need this.
I think that parents just, you need to have a relationship with your child where your child feels like they can tell you anything, that they're safe telling you that. And that'd be my advice. Had Mary's mother not done that, look, 8-year-olds are not going to call 911 and report a crime. They're just, it doesn't happen. And also in those cases, keep in mind that they are just typically always a delayed disclosure. So it's not like the incident happens and they report. That's unusual. I do have those cases, but that's the unusual case. When you get them, they're like, whoa, that kid told right away that child was not going to carry that secret. And, but most kids do. And so you don't have video. and cell phone stuff, and you don't have DNA, and you don't have, you have nothing but the word of a child. That's what you got.
Right. And their words are important. Tami, let's one of the most important things I think about lawyers and the need for them are the people who decide to become a lawyer. And you have a great story, and it's a movie-like story. And if you need somebody to negotiate your movie contract, let me know. But let's get into you. You have a very interesting story because you had an untraditional path, or non-traditional path rather, to becoming a lawyer. Let's talk about that. When I met you in law school, I had no idea. I knew, so Tami and I went to law school, went to the great Valparaiso University School of Law. It was around for almost 170 years. Due to financial problems, it's not around now, but it was a great school. If you need a great lawyer, get a Valpo lawyer. I would say that. But I met Tami in law school, and she always had a tough demeanor. I'm a snarky kind of snide. I don't say snide, but like a sarcastic guy. And Tami always had heat for me. She always could come back with something, and other people couldn't. And she could also tell that I was joking, and a lot of people couldn't. And the reason why is because Tami, like I went a non-traditional path. I worked before I went to law school, so I had a little bit more work experience than most students. And then Tami, unbeknownst to me, was a mom, a married mom. Talk about being a non-traditional law student and how you became a lawyer. Okay. It's very, very compelling.
I'm going to put it in a very, very Cliff Notes version, okay? But essentially, when I was in 8th grade, I went down to the city-county building, and I saw a lawyer trying a case. It was a gang case, and packed courtroom. I saw this.
That's crazy.
I was in 8th grade. I saw these lawyers just duking it out in court, and I thought,
what county was that?
Marion County in Indianapolis.
Okay. You're from Indy.
Yeah, that's where I grew up, and I distinctly felt and knew that's what I want to do.
Wow.
So when I was in 8th grade, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And that was always my plan. Well, I got married and got pregnant right away when I was 19 years old.
Married and pregnant at 19. How long had you been out of high school?
2 years. And I was halfway through undergrad. And I finished my undergrad, married and a mom. But
are you Catholic?
Pardon?
Are you Catholic?
I am.
Okay.
But not at the time.
Okay.
I'm not going to give up all of this, Sean. So anyway, so I got married, had a baby at 19, but I told my husband that I was going to go to law school no matter what. And I was an only child. And I didn't want to only have one kid. And I told him that I'm not going to get pregnant. I don't want any kids after I'm 25. So I'm 19. If we have 6, we have 6. If we have 2, we have 2, whatever. But after 25, I'm not having kids anymore. And he was like, yeah, he was okay. I guess I get no say in this. But anyway, we ended up having raising 4 kids, had all of them before I was 25. I finished my bachelor's degree, and I didn't want to start law school until the youngest was in 1st grade.
Where'd you go to undergrad?
At IU. Well, I started at Butler, but it was too expensive after I got married, so I transferred to IU.
So you went to big time schools while a married mother.
Mm-hmm. In the 80s. Wow. When it wasn't cool at all.
Right.
It was not cool at all to be, anyway. I remember being pregnant with my daughter, Elizabeth, and I was in a senior seminar. And my professor, she was born May 10th on Mother's Day. And so I'm in my senior seminar in May. And he said, do not have that baby in class. I was like, well, you better let me do a short one then. And he did. So anyway, but I didn't want to start law school, Sean, until my youngest was in first grade. I felt really strongly about waiting until, elementary school started. And when you keep having kids, you keep kind of pushing back that date. So
Right.
that's why I started when I did. I started in Valpo, and I loved Valpo. I
I
really
love it
connected
too.
with it. That's why I chose to go there. I immediately felt connected. I loved Berner right away.
I have a funny Burner story. I don't know if you were in my Burner section, but he was my first class in law school, criminal law.
Yeah,
So Burner.
he's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. So it was always a plan for me to go to law school, and I'm glad I went. I have not regretted that. I have always felt a calling to be a lawyer, and what that means, and it's part of who I am as a person.
How did you balance it? Was your husband gung ho about you going to law school with 4 children? And were all the 4 children still in school?
Oh yeah,
Law school?
oh yeah. They were all. Let's
What were
see.
their ages and what grades were they in?
They would have been 10, 9, 7, 6.
Holy cow. I had no idea. I thought you were married with 1 child. I had no idea you had 4. How
yeah.
in the world did you manage? I mean, you were always at class.
Yeah.
You were always prepared,
Mhm.
well read, and you participated and socialized with the students in between classes. How did you do it?
I was really driven, but that's kind of how I am anyway as a person. I'm really organized. I'm very focused, very goal oriented. I try to hold myself accountable and be disciplined about what I do. And I always want to do my best, and my only competition is me.
Mhm.
So I don't.
That's a good thing to say. Your only competition is you.
Yep.
That's important.
Hmm.
Explain that mindset.
Just, I'm trying to be a better person, a better mom, a better lawyer, a better friend, all the time. Assessing yourself and trying to know where you need to improve and trying to be better. It's not easy to do that. But you can't be too hard on yourself, but you definitely have to have expectations. And I think that's what got me through. Plus, it was a goal, and it's one I intended on fulfilling. And fortunately, I was married to somebody who supported that
Mhm.
and was willing to support me through that. We are not married anymore.
Yeah,
We
you were married for 30 years.
were married for 30 years, and we got a divorce in 2014. But we're friendly, and there's nothing awkward or weird about that. He's a good friend to me, and I try to be a good friend to him. We have kids in common, so yeah. But for him, I couldn't have done that at all.
Explain how you managed the children and received the support of your husband. I mean, being a lawyer is important, but being a parent is even more important.
Yeah.
So explain how you balance going to law school and being a great law school student and being a great parent and wife.
Well, I don't know about. I mean, you'd have to bring my kids in and make sure what they thought about my parenting skills at that time. It wasn't easy, and I think I knew it would be a sacrifice to do that at the time. Some people would say that was very selfish of me. That my priorities should have been to be there, be a mom.
I don't think it's selfish at all, especially if you improve your stake and improve the lives of your children by acquiring a professional degree and then maybe improving your income and the things that you could provide for your children, albeit you had to take 3 years out of your life to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you, which is why I did it. But trust me, there is criticism out there. But what I know now is hearing from my daughters about how inspirational that is to them.
Mm-hmm.
That I had a goal, that no matter what, I was going to do that, and they admire that. And so I don't regret it, but I wouldn't have felt good. I don't think I would have been as good of a mother as I could be, such as it is. I wouldn't have been a very good mother if I felt like I had to give up what was important to me as a person for them, and completely compromise myself. So, it wasn't an easy decision, but I'm glad I made it, because I don't think you can really be, and this is my personal opinion, I hope I don't get flamed for it, but I don't think you can be a good parent unless you know yourself. And I know me, and I know that's what I wanted to do.
Right. You have been filled with regret and
Yeah. Resentment
of your children if you didn't go for your goals, even though you had children and you had the requirement to take care of them and
But
provide.
there are people that make that choice, and I respect that. I really do. I'm just saying, for me,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't have worked. And I'm glad I did it. I love being a lawyer. My kids are all glad I did it. So,
Right. What advice would you give a parent who's managing a family and has the dream of going back to law school? What would you tell
make a plan.
them? Mm-hmm.
Be flexible, but make a plan and implement it, because I think it's a great thing for your kids to see you work hard to achieve something in life, and without ever having a talk about that, they see it and they internalize it and they know it. And I think that's what I hoped to show my kids, that if you have a dream, you need to pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell parents that if they feel strongly about that, if that is something that you want to do, let your kids see you pursuing your passion. None of my kids are lawyers, which is totally fine with me, because I think people need to find what they're passionate about and do it. I love coming to work every day. I love being a lawyer, but it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Right. It's hard.
It is hard. It's draining. You feel like you spend your entire life every day dealing with everybody else's problems. And so it's sometimes really easy to just ignore your personal stuff. But I've learned that you have to make yourself a priority. You have to.
I always tell people that if you're vacillating between being a doctor or a lawyer, let's face it, doctors and lawyers are smart people. They're good at taking tests, but lawyers are smarter. And the reason why I always say lawyers are smarter than doctors, if you want to be easy professional life, you become a doctor. If you want a hard professional life and a challenging professional life, you become a lawyer. You go see a doctor and you go, my elbow hurts, my neck hurts, and this guy caused it, right?
Yeah.
The doctor says to you, take 2 aspirin, go to physical therapy, see you later. Remember your copay, right? You go see a lawyer, you go see a criminal lawyer especially, my elbow hurts, my neck hurts. This guy did it, right? You leave the victim, right? You leave the client, the victim is your client, and the state is your client, and you take the problem with you, and it doesn't leave your desk or your mind until the problem is resolved. It is with you. You take it, you put it on your back, you put it on your shoulder, and you say, I have the resources to solve your problem, and you handle it. And I think that, you being an advocate for the community and the victims, and being a lawyer is one of the most important jobs that we have. And it's hard. It's hard taking on somebody else's problem and then managing your own life.
It is. And I would say, add to what you said, especially about civil practice and taking on other people's battle, is that you'll have it for years. You don't get to just, read the file, put it aside, and forget about it. It doesn't work that way. And I do like that part of criminal practice is compared to civil practice, it does turn over quickly. So, for example, I have a murder case right now. The murder occurred in June of 2020, and we'll have it resolved, tried, done, everything. It should be by the end of 2021. So you just don't have them kind of sitting around for years and years and years like you do in civil practice. But the weight of that case and the responsibility that you feel to the victim or the victim's family in this case is something that, I take it very seriously. I try to think of my job in terms of, if I was a victim of a crime, what kind of prosecutor would I want? If my child was the victim of this crime, how would I want the prosecutor to be? And I try to think of it in those terms all the time, and it keeps me focused. And it also allows me, I work out, and I try to walk a lot and do things for stress relief, because it can be really stressful, as you know, it can be very stressful. And it's hard to explain that stress to a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or your, grown adult child. In my case, if you're not an attorney, you don't really get it either.
Right. I find it hard to balance the practice and getting enough exercise and stress relief. I internalize it a lot, and it's really a tough thing to do. I know you got to run, but is there any questions that you'd like to ask me?
Oh,
I know I'm a nosy type. I love asking questions. I love talking. And so that's why I decided to do my podcast. And sometimes I bombard people with so many questions, they don't get to know me, or maybe they're not even interested in knowing me. But I always like to give my guests an opportunity to ask me a question. I
would ask you, what have you not done as a lawyer that you plan to do in the future?
What have I done as a lawyer? Well, one of the things I haven't done as a lawyer that I plan to do is I hope to start a nonprofit to help children read and expand their knowledge and comprehension by reading. So when we're in law school, the number one thing that I learned to do was read for comprehension and not only for facts, right? So in undergrad, we would read just for facts, right? You read to regurgitate these facts and give them to the teacher or the professor and let them know that you did the sufficient homework to understand, to prove that you read the material, right? So they go, what is this? And you tell them what it is. Or how do you do this? And you tell them how it is, right? But in law school, you really have to read for comprehension.
Yeah.
And reading for facts and reading for enjoyment and reading for comprehension are two different things. One of our classmates, I had a chance to study with him, really helped me with reading comprehension. His name was Jamie Abgey. But he was super smart.
Such a nice guy.
Yeah, he was a nice guy. And he helped me with my reading comprehension on how to read. Like, I have a great memory. I have a great lexicon. But I didn't always understand how to read to comprehend. And so one of the things I want to do is start a nonprofit to help encourage children to read, especially minority children, and give them access to books. One of the things my mom did We came from a solid middle-class military family.
Mm-hmm.
And mom would take us to thrift stores and the library and yard sales. And whenever there was a book or magazine we wanted, my mom would buy it for us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And we love to read. I love magazines. I love papers. I can't walk by a free paper and not pick it up. I can't go to a doctor's office not looking in your magazines. And one of the most important things about being a lawyer is reading.
Oh, yeah.
You have to read. That's all we do is read. Right. You get a bad police report, you'll say, holy crap, this guy can't write. Or in my scenario, in civil practice, I'll have a client who is an educated professional, has a master's degree, may have a high job clearance or position, be a CEO, senior manager, and they try to represent themselves in court. And they wrote a complaint or they wrote a demand letter, and you get it and you look at it and you go, this kind of degree, but what is their reading comprehension level?
Yeah.
And so being able to read and understand and comprehension and applying the facts to the law is two different things. And lawyers have a distinct advantage over everybody else with our reading comprehension and our writing ability. We write and read better than anyone.
I agree.
And the hardest part about law school is the first year you're in, you might be at home reading 4 to 5 hours a night.
Oh, every night. Yeah.
It's great. And it's stuff you don't even understand.
Oh, I loved it. So if you get that started, you let me know, because I totally agree with you. And I believe that being a good reader, reading for content and comprehension, like you're talking about, is the foundation of all learning. I don't care if you're coding. I don't care if you go to medical school. I don't care if you're going to be a pharmacist or an engineer, whatever it is, you have to be a good reader to get it done. So it is the foundation of whatever path you're going to take. You have to do that first. And if you can't do that first, or you don't do that first, you're going to compromise your ability to learn the subject, and then down the road, how proficient you are at what you do. You got to read. You got to read.
Read anything. Tami, thank you so much for taking your valuable time to help us, and thank you for your service. A lot of times,
thank you.
We thank the people on the front lines, but we don't thank the people behind the front lines that actually make sure the people that do the crime go to jail, serve their sentences, and you do what's necessary to keep them off the street and make sure it never happens again. So thank you for your service.
Oh, well, thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. And do it ethically.
Yes.
Do it ethically. And I appreciate that, because this is certainly not, if you think you're going to be a prosecutor and you're doing it for the accolades and the attention and the approval and the thank yous, they aren't coming. So I appreciate that when you say that. And thank you for inviting me. I wish you all the best. I love following your Facebook stuff, because you are bold.
I work for myself, and I'm a lawyer. If we don't say it, who else is going to say it?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Who's going to do it?
Yeah, you're right. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love talking about my job, and I appreciate the opportunity to have done so.
Thanks. If people need to get in contact with you, or they're a victim of a crime, is there a number they should call in your county police department?
If they're a victim of a crime, they need to just call 911, because everything I get comes from the police anyway. But yeah, I mean, my favorite is Instagram, and I'm on Instagram. You can find me there. Okay. Instagram's awesome.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sean. Have a great day.
Stay healthy.
Attorney knows best. Intelligent questions. Interesting interviews. Informative insights. Attorney knows best. Attorney knows